Burkina Faso is rewriting the rules of economic survival, and the world is watching. What was once considered impossible, an African nation breaking free from Western aid dependency, is now unfolding in real time, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Burkina Faso has not only replaced USAID, but has turned its agricultural sector into a powerful engine of economic independence. This transformation is not just about feeding the country, it's about rewriting Africa's economic future. Chapter 1. Burkina Faso's Agricultural Breakthrough. Burkina Faso, a country that was once heavily reliant on international aid, has demonstrated a remarkable transformation in its agricultural sector. In 2022, Burkina Faso produced 280,000 metric tons of rice. By 2024, that number had surged to 326,000 metric tons. This dramatic increase is not just a statistic, it signifies a fundamental shift in the nation's agricultural capacity and economic independence. Even more striking, Burkina Faso is no longer simply consuming its homegrown rice. It has started exporting it to other African nations. This development has stunned policymakers in Washington, raising questions about how a country that once depended on food aid from the United States has become a regional food supplier. For decades, the United States Agency for International Development has played a dominant role in shaping food security policies across Africa. These initiatives have been promoted as acts of humanitarian goodwill, providing food aid to millions facing hunger and economic hardship. However, critics argue that the true purpose of these programs was not simply charity, but economic control. The system was designed to benefit American agriculture as much as, if not more than, the recipient nations. Surplus crops produced by American farmers were purchased and shipped to Africa under the USAID program. Nations like Burkina Faso then distributed this imported food to local populations. While this arrangement appeared beneficial at first glance, it came with unintended consequences. By flooding African markets with cheap or free imported food, USAID made it nearly impossible for local farmers to compete, instead of fostering agricultural growth. These programs undermined local food production, keeping African nations dependent on external aid year after year. Chapter 2. A Cycle of Dependency. Burkina Faso, a country with vast arable land and a strong tradition of rice farming, saw its agricultural sector stagnate under this system. Farmers struggled to grow and sell their crops when subsidized American grain arrived in bulk, with limited local production. The country relied on foreign food aid rather than investing in large-scale farming and agricultural infrastructure. Even at the policy level, decisions were shaped by the availability of Western aid rather than the pursuit of food independence. Beyond agriculture, USAID's influence extended into Burkina Faso's political and economic decisions. Many African leaders who relied on U.S. food aid found themselves pressured to align with Washington's foreign policy objectives, whether in trade negotiations, diplomatic agreements, or security partnerships. Reliance on aid often came at the cost of political independence. USAID's role was not just to provide food. It ensured that recipient nations remained economically and politically tied to the United States. For decades, this system remained unchanged. African nations continued to rely on USAID, and there was little motivation to shift towards self-sufficiency. However, when Donald Trump became president of the United States, his administration took a different stance on foreign aid. Trump viewed food assistance programs as a financial burden on American taxpayers and moved to cut spending on Africa. This included significant reductions to USAID's budget for food shipments. These cuts sent shockwaves across the continent, forcing governments that had long depended on food aid to reconsider their agricultural strategies. For Burkina Faso, this was a moment of reckoning. What happens when the aid runs out? Chapter 3. Burkina Faso's Path to Food Independence. Rather than lobbying for USAID to resume operations, Burkina Faso's leadership under President Ibrahim Traoré chose to take a different path. Traore's administration used the crisis as an opportunity to overhaul the nation's agricultural sector instead of depending on foreign assistance. The government prioritized mechanized farming, expanded rice production, and invested in domestic food security. The goal was clear: Burkina Faso would never again be at the mercy of external donors. The results speak for themselves. In just 2 years, rice production increased significantly, making the country not only self-sufficient but also an exporter of food to neighboring African nations. This transformation represents more than just agricultural progress. It is a deliberate rejection of economic dependence on Western aid. Burkina Faso's agricultural revolution has not gone unnoticed. Washington, accustomed to playing a key role in Africa's food security, now finds itself questioning how a former aid recipient has managed to turn the tables. This shift challenges the long-standing belief that African nations must rely on Western assistance to survive. For other African countries, Burkina Faso's success serves as an example of what is possible when governments take control of their own food production. It proves that with the right policies and investments, nations can break free from the cycle of aid dependency and build sustainable agricultural industries. This shift is unfolding at a speed that has caught many by surprise. Unlike previous African governments that waited for international approval or foreign investment before making major economic changes, Burkina Faso has acted decisively on its own terms. In a region where Western-backed financial institutions often dictate policies, this level of defiance is nothing short of revolutionary. The real question now is whether Burkina Faso's rise as a self-sufficient economic power will be allowed to continue. Historically, African nations that have attempted to assert full economic independence from the West have faced significant backlash, whether through economic sanctions, political interference, or, in some cases, direct military intervention. If Burkina Faso's success continues, it could do more than just challenge USAID's role in Africa. It could disrupt the balance of power on the continent. Chapter 4: The concrete results of self-sufficiency. Burkina Faso's economy is showing signs of improvement. Its agricultural sector is growing at a record pace, and its trade partnerships within West Africa are strengthening. One of the clearest indicators of success is the country's ability to meet its own food needs, while also exporting rice to neighboring nations such as Mali, Niger, and Guinea. Just a few years ago, Burkina Faso struggled to feed its own population, relying heavily on imports. Now, it is not only producing enough rice to sustain itself, but is also helping other African nations reduce their dependence on Western food imports. For decades, Burkina Faso, like many other African nations, has operated under a trade imbalance that has drained wealth from its economy. The country exported raw materials at low prices while importing expensive finished goods, allowing foreign industries to reap the real profits. Traore's administration has made it clear that this outdated model must end. If Burkina Faso is to thrive, it must capture more of the economic value within its own borders. Reports indicate that this shift is already underway, with strategic investments aimed at building domestic processing industries, particularly in agriculture and mining, two sectors that have long been the backbone of Burkina Faso's economy. Chapter 5: The rise of domestic food processing. One of the most critical projects in this industrialization push is the construction of a state-of-the-art tomato processing facility, an initiative that is already reshaping Burkina Faso's approach to agriculture, employment, and economic self-sufficiency. The government has committed $8.1 million to this project, reflecting its determination to end reliance on imported tomato paste and canned products, which have historically dominated African markets at the expense of local farmers. Burkina Faso has always been a significant producer of tomatoes, yet without the necessary infrastructure to process them, much of the produce was either wasted or exported as raw goods, only to be re-imported later as expensive finished products from foreign-owned industries. This new facility changes the equation entirely. By processing tomatoes domestically, Burkina Faso is not only reducing waste and increasing production, but also ensuring that profits remain within the country. This shift is about more than just food. It is about economic sovereignty. Instead of relying on foreign suppliers for processed foods, Burkina Faso is now building its own value chains, creating employment opportunities for farmers, factory workers, and local entrepreneurs. Reports suggest that the plant will process thousands of tons of tomatoes annually, not only meeting domestic demand, but also positioning Burkina Faso to begin exporting finished products to neighboring African nations. Chapter 6: The Game-Changing Gold Refinery. While the tomato processing facility is a major step forward in agricultural industrialization, Traoré's ambition extends far beyond food. Another groundbreaking initiative is Burkina Faso's first-ever gold refinery, a move that could permanently shift the balance of power in the country's mining sector. For years, Burkina Faso's gold wealth has been exploited by multinational corporations, which extracted raw gold, refined it abroad, and sold it back at massive profits. This system, where African nations serve merely as sources of raw materials while foreign businesses reap the true economic rewards, has kept Burkina Faso in a position of economic vulnerability. But Traoré's administration has declared that this era is coming to an end. The government has announced the construction of a gold refinery with the capacity to process 400 kilograms of gold per day, a move that will allow Burkina Faso to refine its gold within the country and sell it directly on global markets. This refinery is not just a financial investment, it is a declaration of economic independence. By controlling its own gold processing, Burkina Faso will no longer be at the mercy of foreign buyers who dictate prices and terms. Instead, the country will set its own policies, collect more revenue from its natural resources, and reinvest in its own development. Chapter 7: Expanding Industrialization Beyond Mining and Agriculture. Traoré's vision for Burkina Faso's economic future does not stop at gold or agriculture. Reports suggest that his administration is also exploring broader industrial expansion, including the modernization of manufacturing, textiles, and energy production. The ultimate goal is clear. Burkina Faso must stop being a supplier of raw materials and start becoming a producer of finished goods. This is a fundamental shift in African economic thinking. For too long, African nations have relied on exporting raw materials while importing finished products at high prices, locking them into a cycle of economic dependence. If Burkina Faso's industrialization efforts succeed, they could serve as a blueprint for similar transformations across the continent. By prioritizing industrialization alongside agricultural reform, Traoré is ensuring that Burkina Faso's economy does not just grow, it evolves. This strategy is not merely about increasing the country's wealth, but about making it self-sustaining, reducing its reliance on Western-dominated global supply chains. Some analysts believe that this shift could spark a new era of self-reliance across Africa, particularly in regions where food security and economic stability have historically depended on outside intervention. If Burkina Faso's rice supply strategy continues to thrive, it could encourage other countries to invest in their own agricultural production, reducing reliance on imports and foreign donations. Chapter 8: The Decline of Western Aid. Influence. The reaction from the United States and its allies remains uncertain, but some sources suggest that the diminishing role of USAID in Burkina Faso is a sign of America's weakening influence in Africa, with African nations forming stronger economic ties among themselves and prioritizing self-sufficiency over reliance on Western aid. The traditional model of engagement, where foreign assistance often dictated economic direction, is beginning to lose its grip. This could force a significant re-evaluation of US and European policies on the continent. Historically, aid programs have been used as tools of influence, ensuring that African economies remained tied to Western interests. Now, as countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger choose to develop regional trade networks and strengthen intra-African economic relationships, Western powers may find themselves struggling to maintain the same level of control they once had. The world is watching. Will Burkina Faso's movement spread across Africa? Or will external pressures attempt to force a return to the old ways? If this transformation continues as planned, the future will belong not to those who rely on foreign aid, but to those who take control of their resources and build their economies from within. This is more than just an economic shift. It is a challenge to the global order that has kept Africa in a subordinate position for far too long. Burkina Faso is proving that self-reliance is not a dream, but a reality that is within reach. If you believe that Africa deserves to control its own future, let us know in the comments. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future updates on the real stories shaping Africa's future. Thanks for watching.